Hi, I'm Sean Ricketts. I'm a paralegal at the law offices of Jacob Aronauer, and we're a law firm that specializes in employment law.
Yeah, I'm Karin Weston. I also work as paralegal at the law offices of Jacob Aronauer. And yeah, as a paralegal, some of the things that I do include drafting documents to submit to the court, meeting with clients to make sure that we're getting their story correct, drafting damages spreadsheets to calculate how much our clients are owed. Yeah, what are some other things?
We do a fair bit of proofreading, always important. We also do legal research, investigating what the legal precedents are for the issues that we confront, and just generally take care of whatever office activities need to be done, which is actually what we're doing right now. We really wanted to talk to you a little bit more about employment law. During this difficult time, it's still just as important to know what your rights are as an employee in New York State. First, it's important to know that the statute of limitations in New York goes back 6 years, and under federal law, 3 years. So even if you're unemployed, or if you're currently working for an employer that's paying you correctly, if you worked for someone in the past 6 years in the state of New York who did not pay you correctly, you can still bring a case against them.
Yeah, and so with wage and hour law cases, these are cases where people are not paid minimum wage or overtime correctly. And so you may not know if you're entitled to overtime pay, but anybody who's working over 40 hours in a week, the hours that you're working past 40 hours, those are overtime hours. And the rate of pay that you should be paid for those hours is 1.5 times your regular hourly rate of pay.
So for example, if you're making the minimum wage in New York right now, which is $15 an hour in New York City, for any hours worked over 40 hours in a week, you should be making $22.50 for those hours worked. It's important to note that this, of course, applies to non-exempt workers. If you're an exempt worker and you're a salaried worker, you know who you are, and you know if this does or does not apply to you. So it's also important to note that these rules apply no matter how you're paid. If you're paid a daily wage or a weekly wage, if you're working more than 40 hours a week, you still need to be paid more for your overtime hours worked, which of course is more difficult to think about both for the employee and the employer, which is why we of course recommend that businesses pay people an hourly wage. It's much less confusing for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that employers are required to do when a new employee is hired, the employer is required to give that new employee a piece of paper stating the employee's rate of pay at an hourly rate. And the employee needs to sign it. And that wage notice also needs to be in the employee's native language. And yeah, if that hasn't happened for you, then it's something that you can collect damages for.
Exactly. Your employer is also required to give you another piece of paper every time you're paid, whether that's daily or weekly or every 2 weeks or every month, telling you how many hours you worked, how many overtime hours you worked, your overtime rate of pay, your regular rate of pay, your name, your employer's name, and anything else, such as if you're receiving below the minimum wage, what we call the tipped minimum wage. For example, if you work for a restaurant, you might get paid below the minimum wage, which is legal as long as your employer tells you that you're going to be paid below the minimum wage, that you'll be making the rest in tips. And it tells you what those numbers are with every pay stub.
Yeah, so we've gone through a couple of the issues with wage and hour law, but these are some of the more overarching things. There are lots of small specifics that we have not gotten into here. And if you have any questions about your specific situation, please feel free to give us a call. We're happy to answer questions.
Our offices are open even now, and we would love to hear from you. We didn't mention earlier that when we're not paralegals, Karin and I are actually both professional performing musicians. So as you can imagine, that job is not taking up a lot of our time right now. So we are especially available and ready to help you with any employment law questions you may have.